Joining me to discuss the vet shortage and more issues facing Idaho's ag producers is Rick Narabout with the Idaho Dairymen's Association and Braden Jensen with the Idaho Farm Bureau. Rick, I wanted to start with you. We talked to ranchers for this project, but this is also something that affects Idaho's dairymen and other ag producers. What are you hearing from your members?
Yeah, so veterinarians are a key piece of our industry. You know, most dairies have veterinarians on their facility once, twice a week doing regular herd checks and other practice needs. So definitely a integral part of the dairy industry. I think we're a little bit fortunate compared to ranchers in very rural parts of Idaho in that most of our dairy facilities, we end up clustered in pockets. And so it's a little bit easier for a veterinarian to build a book of business in large animal practice in dairy-centric areas because there's more opportunities to offer their services out. So it's an issue for us. It probably cuts a little bit deeper for the ranchers just given the rural nature and the sparseness of business opportunities in a lot of the places where ranchers are grazing and operating.
How optimistic are you, Braden, that the state is going to figure out a solution to this, or at least pieces of a solution?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a variety of things that the state can do to try to help address this issue. And it has been, brought to their attention that this is a real issue. I mean, we've seen over the past couple legislative sessions that, the ag committees have heard working group reports on this topic, addressing what are the issues, what could the state possibly do. Of course, we're very grateful for the programs that exist to try to help educate future professionals in these fields to address, the need that exists. But what else do we need? As Idaho ag industry continues to grow, and we recognize that again we are a livestock state here, and that we need to make sure that these professionals are in every location to be able to address the needs that our ranchers have and dairymen. But I am optimistic that the message is getting through, that it's being heard. We'll see what we have a new group of legislators that may be just coming to understand this issue and the reality that it is. So it's going to take a little bit of education again to get people back up to speed. But for those legislators that are incumbents that have been there for a while, this isn't going to be the first time that they hear this. And I think again we're going to come with a whole variety of options that they can look at and consider.
Another critical component of Idaho's ag industry is the water supply. Last week, groundwater and surface water users in eastern Idaho announced they had reached a new agreement to protect the health of the eastern Snake Plain aquifer. The negotiation came after farmers with junior groundwater rights faced a possible curtailment order from the state in May. In other words, that threatened order could have shut off groundwater pumping to a large swath of ag land in eastern Idaho after the Department of Water Resources calculated a potential shortage this season that would have affected senior water rights holders along the Snake River. The new agreement requires the groundwater districts to conserve 205,000 acre-feet of water annually to improve the health of the aquifer. Groundwater allotments will be issued in 4-year blocks, giving users more flexibility for year-to-year management and crop rotations. All groundwater districts must report monthly water use measurements, and the groundwater districts will be evaluated for compliance with the plan individually rather than collectively. The 4-year legal agreement will cease all litigation between the parties for now and can be renewed in another 4 years. Obviously so important to both of your organization's members. Braden, what are you hearing on this agreement and what led up to it from Farm Bureau members?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And this really is an important issue, and it addresses such a large portion of our membership. And I will say, we're not party to the agreement, but we are very grateful that the parties were able to come together and do the hard work. And it was extremely hard work. When you start talking about, an aquifer the size of Lake Erie and impacting farmers and ranches all the way from Ashton to King Hill, right? I mean, it's a pretty large geographical area of the state. And so we're grateful that this agreement has been reached, and that as part, and you highlighted this, that as part of the agreement with all the terms and all the different conditions, that we stop the fighting right now. We stop the litigation, we pause it so that we can see if this will actually work. And so I think there's from our membership, a level of anticipation to see how this will work, how this all plays out. I think there's an element of relief that there is some surety and security in going forward, particularly as, obviously we live in the high desert West. Weather patterns are pretty cyclical here. Sometimes we go through dry spells, and so what would this mean going into a dry spell? And hopefully the terms of the agreement spell out the responsibilities in a way that it's clear, and as long as they're upheld, that we can keep as much production ag land in production.
The Idaho Dairymen's Association also was not a party to the official negotiations, right?
Correct.
But you
Yes.
had members who were very involved.
Yes, no, we have members very involved. The reality is we have nearly 500,000 dairy animals that sit on top of the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer. So, no way around that. That negotiation was going to affect our industry positively or negatively. I think we went into it with a decent amount of confidence. You get farmers around a table and their ability to problem solve is bar none some of the best. And so went into it with a decent amount of confidence that we'd find a resolve and we'd find some solutions and find some middle ground. But yeah, we as an organization weren't at the table. We definitely have some dairymen that are on the boards of groundwater districts and canal companies that were at the table. And we're watching this very closely just because it could have significantly impacted our industry if there wasn't that resolve found.
What would have been the worst case scenario had you not found, or not you, but had they not found a solution?
So for us, the worst case scenario would have been likely increase in forage costs. The majority of the cutbacks were going to happen in eastern Idaho. That's outside the area where most dairy animals are located. We're really concentrated around the Magic Valley, but there are a lot of forages grown in East Idaho for our industry. So we definitely would have seen increases in feed costs and some financial pressure coming from that, just because there's no way to curtail as many acres as they were talking about curtailing without that impacting our cost of feed and the cost of hay in the state.
Much more direct impacts for your members in that part of the state.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have members that were directly impacted by the water call that was made, but we also had members on the side of the parties that were making the call. And I think it's important to remember that, obviously a water right is a property right in this state and should be respected. And again, we're really grateful that this settlement agreement respects the water rights that exist, the priority that has been established, but then also utilizes the law and the flexibility that it allows for to find these types of agreements when they can be reached by both parties in a way that, again, we can respect that property right, but still also continue to, see our economies flourish.
And in layman's terms, for people who aren't familiar with water rights and water law in the state, a call is basically saying you can't use as much water as you normally do.
Yeah, essentially a call is placed when a senior water right individual is not receiving their full allotment of water. And so they would essentially place a call to the state, IDWR, our Department of Water Resources, essentially stating that, hey, I'm not getting my full water allotment. We need to address this. And so the IDWR will look at all the factors that are playing into that to determine, indeed, if there's an injury occurring. And if so, then a curtailment order would be placed for any water right holder who is junior to that.
What might the long-term implications be of this? I don't want to call it a short-term crisis, but the potential crisis that was averted. Is the bleeding stopped for now, or are you going to be keeping an eye on what's happening over the next couple years until 2027 when this agreement could be re-upped?
Yeah, excellent question. Certainly this is something we're going to continue to monitor. We're going to continue to be really dialed into. Again, our members, this is critical. Again, being in the high desert West, land is extremely important. Water's even more important when we're talking about these row crops and everything like that, the forage crops that the dairymen depend on. And so again, we're going to watch this very closely and see how this all plays out. And hopefully that everybody can live up to the terms that have been agreed to and to their responsibility, and that we can continue to find a path forward.
Yeah. And if I can add, I think the importance of this agreement is it brings stability and the opportunity for future growth, because you take the issue of uncertainty off the table. We know what the rules of the game are. We know what we have to do to be able to, provide that certainty and have stability in the water rights that will be, honored. So it really creates economic opportunity for the state, and the ability for us to say with certainty we are managing our water resources sustainably, and we can bring in new businesses. We can continue to allow agriculture to flourish, given the certainty that the settlement agreement brings.
When we're looking at the state of agriculture and all of the other compounding factors, Idaho's population growth, summers that are hotter and drier, less precipitation, the aquifer level that is going down, are you confident about the future of Idaho ag, or are we going to hit a point where, as you say, we might not be able to handle much more growth?
I'm going to say I'm confident. I mean, the reality is you look at much of the western U.S. and we are decades ahead of our counterparts in other states in managing our water resources. We've got a plan in place. We have the ability to recharge our aquifer. We have so much going for us and so much in our favor that we're pretty bullish on the ability of agriculture to continue to be the backbone of Idaho's economy and to grow. Not huge growth rates, but incremental growth. And we need that incremental growth for our farmers and ranchers and dairymen to have viable businesses to be able to pass on to the next generation.
Yeah, definitely, I would say we share that optimism. And it goes back to what I think Rick said earlier, because of the people that we represent, the farmers and ranchers, and their ability to problem solve. You're absolutely right. These are real challenges. Everything from, droughts and persisting periods of hot temperatures, increased demand on all these natural resources and everything like that. But our members, our farmers and ranchers in the state, they are problem solvers. And I think also we're very fortunate to have, when we were talking about water, the water systems that we do have, the reservoirs, the delivery systems that we do have. And that's largely based off of past generations and the work that they did. Now it's incumbent upon this generation to do their work. And now the work that we do definitely looks different. We may not be building the large dams and the canal infrastructure that have been done in the past, but the maintenance of that infrastructure is just as important. And then also finding new ways to, again, increase the health of that aquifer, that groundwater resource, and then more conservation. So.
Yeah. One last question. The incoming Trump administration has made immigration enforcement a huge priority. That includes staunching the flow at the border and also mass deportations. This is at least the conversation that they're having. And it's no secret that the ag industry relies on immigrant workers out of necessity. Do you have concerns with the talk of mass deportations?
Well, I guess I want to first state that when it comes to some of the areas of this topic, that when talking about securing the border, I just want to state that that's something that our members are very supportive of for a whole host of reasons. And for I think it's extremely important that we understand who's coming in and how people are coming in, and that there is a process for people to come in legally. And I think when we address the border security issue, we can really move on to start addressing many other issues and many other priorities that we have within the Farm Bureau, which is addressing visa programs. Because there are many of our farms and ranches in this state that are able to get their labor needs met, maybe with the domestic workforce, but there's many that cannot. And so we have to work and we have to turn to visa programs such as the H-2A program. But the reality,
and for those who aren't familiar, the H-2A program is seasonal.
Yeah, exactly. So the H-2A program is agriculture's visa program for an ag workforce. But you're absolutely right. It only addresses seasonal agriculture. And that does not cover a good portion of our agriculture industry, specifically into this state. And so we need to, again, address that border security issue so that we can move on and start having more robust conversations about visa programs like H-2A.
This is something I'm sure your members have opinions on, because the dairy industry is not seasonal. Those cows need to be milked every day.
Yeah, no, this is an issue that hits us very acutely. 90% of our workforce is foreign-born, and we don't have access to a visa program. And we would echo Farm Bureau's support for addressing the issue at the southern border. That to us is a given. That has to be done. And we're optimistic that as we start to address the flow at the southern border and have a better understanding of who's coming and going and can get our arms around that, then it does create the space that we can have a good conversation about what we need for reforms and what we can do to be able to get workers lined up to the job demands that we have. Because it's really a math equation. We don't have enough domestic workers to fill all the jobs that we have in this state or in this country. And so for our economic health as a country and as a state, we need visa programs to provide us enough workers, because we don't have the birth rate and we don't have the domestic workforce to fill the jobs that our businesses are creating.
Considering the tenor of the conversation around immigration right now in this country, are you optimistic that now's the time to make this happen? Especially considering we've been talking about visa reform for how many decades now?
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Yeah, no, we've literally been working on this issue for 20 years. For 20 years, we've been going back to Washington, D.C. and pleading with our politicians to help provide a solution to this problem. So this isn't something that we've just stumbled upon in the last few years here, but it's been a growing issue since Reagan last addressed it in 1986.
Yeah.
So very much something that we're focused on and trying to find solutions for, and solutions that work for everybody. You can't have a one-sided solution. We can't just focus on enforcement. We have to line up and in parallel have enforcement, but also the opportunity for legal pathways so that you don't stifle businesses and you don't kill our economy.
Yeah, I think I would just like to add is that it's very much our approach that it's all of the above. Issues. I mean, addressing the labor issues, the visa programs, and everything like that. Also, trying to entice our domestic workforce to consider what jobs may be available. Also, implementing new technologies. I mean, you see that in agriculture so much. But no one thing is going to be the solve-all or the silver bullet. And so we're going to have to be addressing this from many different angles. And so, again, this will be another challenge that we continue to address, and we look forward to seeing it through.
All right, Braden, Rick, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.